Hello and welcome to the last community stream of the year. Today I am joined by Timmy Selesmo, who is the CEO at North Squared. Hey, Timmy.
Hello, Bailey. Nice to be here.
Yeah. Do you mind telling me a little bit about yourself? I think this is the first time you've been on the stream.
Yeah, it is. My name is Timmy, based in Sweden, CEO of North Squared, as you mentioned. Have a background in computer engineering and started out as a game programmer, where I first got in touch with WebAssembly and initially Asm.js. So that's kind of my first interaction I had with this community and WebAssembly itself.
Wow, I love that. That's kind of similar to my story. I did not get to actually work on gaming though, although gaming concentration from NC State A. But I focused on graphics and was playing around with ASM.js in 2012. So I get that, and also huge gamer. I don't think my gaming rig, you cannot see it, and I would have to mess around with the camera, so I'm not going to play with that. But very cool. So I'm going to run through a few updates pretty quickly, and then Timmy, you're going to give us all an update on C# and .NET. So let us get underway. So that's the basic agenda, and a little reminder that you can ask questions over in the community stream on Zulip, or I can see them all come through YouTube as well. And we're live, so please ask your questions. I have Timmy here. So for our update on WASI 2.0, our next community or our subgroup of the WASI subgroup, losing my words. That's January 11th. And so we are going to hopefully hold our vote to launch Preview 2 officially. And the reason why we'll be able to do that is that we have two worlds, WASI CLI and WASI HTTP at phase 3, and we have the implementation, a second implementation in JCO, the JavaScript component tooling that allows us to run with these specifications inside Node.js, nearing completion. So I think we'll be coming in hot. I checked the project board this morning and saw that we still have a few issues to resolve and knock out. I'll cover that on the next slide. But with WASM Time 16, we have a release that you can use today that depends on the current release candidates, including WASI CLI and WASI HTTP proxy. Both are now pinned to 12.05 is when we set that release candidate. I've been building with it just fine, and it feels like this could be the one. So the whole purpose of release candidates is that people can pull it in and give us feedback, find any issues. So please do that before January 11th, before we launch. Otherwise, we are going to tag it as 2.0, and those are the specs that we have. So with the WASI 2.0 progress, this is the board. I just took a screenshot of that this morning, and you can see that most of the issues here are, around JCO and componentized JS, which is part of the toolchain inside that's used by JCO. And additionally, there's some more tests that we want to add around WASI HTTP, but otherwise, very, very close to being complete. As far as our update for WASM Time, that was released, I believe, last week and towards the end of last week. And it is using, as I said earlier, the pinned release candidate. There were also a couple different updates. I want to give a shout out to Tyler Rockwood for the several additions that he put in to the C API. Alex went in and also trimmed down basically what the Preview 1 to Preview 2 component adapter uses, and also WASM Time Serve is only using exactly what it has to, effectively the things that are dependent on inside the WASI HTTP proxy world. So that's a really nice enhancement. And then the one last thing that I wanted to call out, although there were several other changes, so please go and check out the releases markdown, basically our changelog for more detail, but WASM Time and CraneLift now require Rust 172. I was able to update to that. I did run into issues in my project, but all of those have been now resolved upstream. So I think most folks should give it a whirl. And I think out of all these changes, that's probably the one that most users will notice when they upgrade from Wasmtime 15 to Wasmtime 16. And with that, that is our around the house update. So Timmy, I would love for you to tell us about the C# and .NET project. Potentially, a little bit about the subgroup that you work in inside the SIG guest languages. So yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, so the subgroup was started a few months ago together with Scott and James that organized the group together with myself. We have, we started out with implementation for native AOT using LLVM. So that is a Runtime Labs project over at Microsoft. That we essentially started out with to bring .NET and C# to WebAssembly. A part of that, we also recently started working on support for adding in Mono with Mono AOT as well as interpreted mode. And that has been a lot of work being on Microsoft side to get that over the line. And we recently started adding support for that in with Bindgen for C# as well. So the initial support is starting to be there. It's somewhat usable in very small use cases currently, so we don't support all of the primitives within component model and with yet. So we don't have resources. We have mostly after this week, we should have most other things or most of the other primitives apart from resources up. And then we are looking at bringing resources in for January of next year. So it should be a couple of weeks away, hopefully.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll be able to borrow from the work that's been done for basically the Bindgen for JavaScript/TypeScript from the Jco side, from Componentized Pi. I know that it was a bit, a couple week lift at least for both of those languages, but it feels like every time that we add a new language to the mix, like hopefully with C# and .NET, we're going to accelerate that and have enough common shared tooling and patterns that it's a little less frictionless. However, resources does always seem to be the one, that is different enough where a lot of that work is. So you said a couple words that I think maybe people who aren't in the C# and .NET ecosystem might not be familiar with. I think I heard Mono. So it sounds like there's a couple different compiler options for WASM in the C# .NET ecosystem. Is that about right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Do you mind walking through some of those? Because, for example, I bet a lot of people are like, hey, I've been doing C# and WASM for a while with Blazor. What's the difference between that and some of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first of all, Blazor is mainly focusing on the web and running workloads on the web. And it's not conformant with the component model, essentially. So what we are trying to do with Find generation for the component model is essentially, bring C# and .NET to be able to run outside the browser as well, and in Wasmtime and other runtimes. There are a few different runtimes. So we started out, as I mentioned, with native AOT with LLVM that compiles the code to native code, essentially. And the difference between that and Mono is Mono has two different modes, an interpreted mode, where it's bundling the .NET bytecode and running that using an interpreter. So it's essentially still .NET bytecode, and it's just essentially just converted the interpreter to run using WebAssembly. And then there is an AOT mode within Mono as well. that, frankly, I'm not too deeply familiar with, but that's also an option. But mainly been focusing on native AOT for that aspect, as it seems to have a lot better performance and smaller size of the actual output as well.
So I'm pretty new to the ecosystem, so forgive me if I get these parts wrong, but I think your work on the Mono toolchain allows you to build on like any operating system hardware. So, I work on a Mac for the most part, so I could use your Mono side of things and build and get a component. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So that's a good point, and something I forgot to mention. The native AOT one currently only works for running and building on Windows, and then of course it outputs WASM, so that can be run anywhere. But that's a limitation for now, and I'm sure that's something we will be looking at in the future as well.
But I guess is the outputted WASM component. I guess it's different between which one of these tool chains I use because they use different compilation techniques and then perhaps a different like runtime. I know, for componentized Pi, for example, we build in CPython so that we can run like an interpreted mode of the Python code. Is that kind of how you would break down the differences between Mono and the native AOT?
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. Yeah, so essentially just ship the Mono interpreter with the .NET bytecode of the generated from your application.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. Great. And so there's work happening, and I posted in the chat inside the .NET Runtime Labs repository where there's the native AOT LLVM, and I think if I remember correctly from the subgroup meeting, that's sort of the direction that I think we really want to grow things so that you get the most efficient component, in terms of speed, potentially even memory footprint as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
However,
the work that you're doing inside with BindGen, that would work for either, or does it also need to know which mode it's in?
Yeah, so currently there is a few minor differences in the generated output, but so you essentially passing a flag for which one you want to use currently. But we are trying to get that to essentially be the same regardless of if you're targeting Mono or native AOT. So from the end user's perspective, that should be identical. That's the goal, at least, and we're starting to get there with the recent introduction of the WASM import linkage attribute that was added both to native AOT as well as Mono, and with that addition, we are pretty much there where they're more or less equal. I can't think of anything out on top of my head that would differentiate or be different between the two when that's in. And that's landed like a week ago, and we are still working on landing the Mono support for with BindGen. Just a few minor things left to do there.
Yeah, I think one of the key differences here with the C# network is how closely you've been working with upstream. I think that's awesome, right? So many of the pieces that we've had to do in other languages is kind of effectively create a fork or a POC and then work with upstream maintainers, and that takes time to get that integrated over. Sometimes, dual maintenance is involved, and being able to work like directly with upstream and then fold it in is absolutely the ideal. So I've loved watching that part of the work you guys have been doing. It's been great.
Yeah, I think it's been great as well, and we've had luck in that regard. So when North Squared first joined Bytecode Alliance, we spoke with Ralph, who set us up with a lot of contacts at Microsoft. As I mentioned, we had worked on that internally beforehand, so we had it fully working before the big component model shift, and we wanted to bring that and share that with the rest of the Bytecode Alliance community. So yeah, mentioned that during the call and set us up with the right people. And that's kind of where it started a year ago. We had a bit of a slow start, but after a while with me and Scott playing around with it, trying to get all the components working and everything. So Scott had been working a lot on the native AOT project beforehand. So he brought his expertise there, and we essentially ported what we had initially in Mono to run on top of native AOT. And we saw quite significant reduction in the output binary size, as well as performance increase. But that's a bit too early to tell at this point, I think, but it looks promising.
Yeah, I've also seen James. I'm forgetting his last name at the moment, though. Do you know his last name? I can.
Yeah, I absolutely do. Have a hard time pronouncing it. Sorry, James. So it's, I will paste it in chat, and probably his native speaker can't pronounce that a lot better than myself.
Sturtevant.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So James has been burning down a list. We have a tracking issue inside the WIP BindGen project for this work, and he's just been churning away at it, which is great to see. And I guess if you were to suggest a place where anybody, if they want to hop in and contribute, would it be WIP BindGen, or should they join a meeting first and kind of ask what's happening and get pointed in the right direction? What would you suggest to somebody that wants to contribute?
I mean, joining meetings is probably a good way to start, but they're definitely free to just jump on the issue tracker and then pick something off the list. And then, of course, there are also a few issues raised on the .NET repository that still are outstanding that could also be contributed to.
Okay, inside the chat, I've posted the where to get more information about the C# meeting. And the project that we mentioned before is WIP BindGen. That's where a lot of the work is happening. Although I suppose I would tell people to wait for your piece to land, with a lot of the primitive types effectively being added now.
Arrays and what do you call that? So
variant,
yeah,
all of those,
all of those essentially, and then I know Scott is working on bringing in flags as well, and I think James is working on options. So I think we should have all of those very soon.
Got it. That's great. Yeah, so what types of projects or use cases are you looking forward to building with this once this tooling's in place?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm involved in a lot of compute workloads running on servers, IT devices, and similar, and also have an interest in satellites and space, and so
Cool.
Definitely looking forward to be able to use C# and .NET for some of those use cases. Using C# for quite a while, and I think it's been a good language for a lot of these things, but haven't really found a good way beforehand to run them on IoT devices, for example. So I think this could be a good entry point for that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So probably the native AOT piece, so that you'd get something really tiny. But yeah, that's easily one of the coolest use cases that I can think about for WASM components, is running everywhere, including tiny hardware that has weird operating systems that I can't build for on my Mac, usually. Rust embedded's awesome, but when you're building with a language that you're familiar with, like C#, because hey, you've got a gaming background, me too. I like writing in C# for Unity, the game engine. That's where I learned how to use it. And yeah, I would love to be able to write in a language I know, target basically any device anywhere. And then IoT gets this extra boost because we're able to effectively do digital twins, and that I can run and test things local development with the exact same artifact that I could then send to the device that is then plugged into different hardware pieces through WASI. So yes, I'm here for that use case. That's the one I'm excited about too. I don't know. I've got a little microcontroller soldering station right behind me where I love to fiddle with that kind of thing. I'm gonna put WASM in my keyboard is probably my New Year's resolution.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a fun use case, and I love tinkering with hardware as well, and being able to use C# and .NET for that will be fun, and also a lot quicker, I think, than the current workflow I have with C++ and C, and which
and memory safe, right?
yeah.
Cool. All right, I love it. That's really exciting. I think I've asked all of my questions. I do welcome anybody that's watching live to please chime in the comments and ask Timmy any of your questions. While those are queuing up, I'm gonna run through a little bit of the events that are coming up, just so people are aware. And you can actually catch Timmy at this next one, which is in Barcelona. So that's one great reason to go. But also, last year it was so good. I really enjoyed all the talks. I thought that the conference itself had this really great vibe, great venue, and just really well run and organized. And the CFP is still open. So I believe it closes in like 5 days. I'm half reminding myself right now while I'm saying this out loud to get your CFPs in for the 14th and 15th of March in Barcelona. And then the following week, and I was trying to convince Timmy right before we started running this live stream to join this event. It is co-located to KubeCon and Cloud Native Con, and this is the WASM Day in EU and at Paris. So, if you can't make it to Barcelona, I guess you got to go to Paris. It is going to have, I think, about 6 talks. So it's a condensed half day, effectively. But one ticket to this conference gives you access to all of the other co-located events. So that's really nice because there are things like GitOps with Argo CDCon, Observability Day, all of those kind of things that I also am really excited about. I think a lot of the folks here share a lot of common interests because we're using WASM to solve a problem, and it's a key part of our stack. But there is a stack that we want to fit into. And there are also really great WASM talks at a lot of the other co-located events as well. So that CFP is closed and the schedule will be announced soon. So I hope I see everybody in both Barcelona and Paris because I'm planning on hopping a plane and staying across the pond for at least those 2 weeks. So hope to see everybody there. It looks like we haven't gotten any more questions, but that's okay. I think a lot of people are enjoying their holidays and hanging out with family, which I totally vibe with. So let's. I think we should end the stream early, but I want to end it with at least one more cool point that everybody should check out. What, Timmy, is the coolest thing that you've seen compiled to WASM? I didn't prep you ahead of time for this, so I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot. But what's your favorite WASM demo, use case, thing you've seen in the wild? And it could be something that you've made because honestly, that's what came to mind when I asked this question.
That's a really good question. Not sure, to be honest. So I've seen a few projects where WebAssembly running on satellites and similar, which I think is very interesting, and definitely something I'm passionate about. But Apart
What would
from
I
that,
what would I Google to find that? WASM on a satellite?
that's a good question, actually. I'm not entirely sure. Just came across it in the passing, so not something I worked on myself, unfortunately. But definitely something I have an eye on, and something I have a use case I've prepared for myself, or been working on for quite some time. But nothing that I've shared publicly yet. Apart from that, not sure.
What about WAS squared?
Yeah, of course. So, WebAssembly Analyzer is a project that I've been working on that essentially allows you to look at WebAssembly binaries that are uploaded to a Borg registry, or you can just drag and drop a WebAssembly file onto the browser to inspect it. There is actually a lot more that we've been working on, and the project is supposed to be open sourced, but haven't gotten around to it yet. Been super busy around around the end of the year here, but it will be open sourced early next year. When we are looking at adding full like disassembly support and debugging and a lot more that I will be excited to share in the future. So that's yeah, essentially search for WebAssembly Analyzer and you should be able to find it, or wa2.io or dev. Either works.
Yeah, I really like this, and I've used it not like a crazy amount because I usually am using the WASM tool CLI for things, but I've definitely done this in demos because there's something magical about the drag and drop and just seeing it, that people start to really get it. Where when I'm doing things in my CLI, I guess they're kind of like, oh, smoke and mirrors, she could be doing tricksies here. But when I'm taking a .wasm and I'm dropping it on a totally different site, and then you see, oh, it's self-describing. Like I can learn everything you need to know about it by just looking at the binary. So I really appreciate you having built that tool. I think it's really wonderful.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so there will be a lot more in terms of adding or being able to browse the component model tooling or component model types and the documentation therein as well. So also something we've been working on that should be published relatively soon. But yeah, if anyone is interested in that project, feel free to contribute once we open source it next year.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Timmy. I really enjoyed having you on the stream. Folks can talk to you on Zulip. I know you're active there. And then please join the C# subgroup within the SIGGUEST languages if you want to talk to Timmy and Scott and James, who have all been pushing forward a lot of great work on the C# bindgen and WASM component tooling. So thank you. And I suppose I'll say happy holidays.